So I decided to remove a game from the list this week. What list? Oh right, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and this is the Backlog. Anyway, years ago, I tracked down a copy of Mega Man Legends 2, got all the way to the final boss, and couldn't even get past their first form, and put it down. I've just had it kind of chilling on the list since then, telling myself that yes, I would definitely go back and beat it one day. Normal playtime clocks in at about 10 hours, so I decided that I didn't want to play through the entire game for just one boss fight, and that I had improved enough at games overall that I could just do it. That proved incorrect, however, as I took a few fights to relearn the controls, and then got continually stomped, maybe getting a bit past halfway through the boss's HP a few times. And really, what can I say? I was kinda dumb to think that I could just jump right back into the hardest part of a game that has defeated me in the past and just win, plus, even if I had, my reward would have been, what? A bunch of cutscenes that I would have forgotten most of the context for. It really wouldn't be worth it. I mostly just didn't want to give up on it because it was Mega Man, though by that logic I also owe the classic 9 and 10 more time. While I don't dislike Legends, I'd rank 2D platformers first, then the grid-based deck-building battle networks and Star Forces after that, with the 3D adventure games being a distant third. There's a part of me that wants to blame the game. I wanted to look at my loadout, but pausing or talking to Data wouldn't bring it up. I also tried to exit the dungeon to talk to Roll, thinking that that might do it, and I could even grind and get stronger and more acquainted with the controls again, but I lost patience after I walked through several empty floors with the promised exit seeming to still be a ways off and got fed up. While I do think these are some design flaws, at the same time, it doesn't cover my main problems. First is that I probably just didn't grind or look for upgrades enough. If I had managed to wreck the boss, I would have clocked in at an hour and a half lower than the average playtime, which tells me I probably didn't put enough time in to really maximize Mega Man's potential. The second thing is, I'm probably just not super good at this sort of game. A third-person shooter from a console I really don't have a ton of experience with is not a good match for me. The hardware limitations from 20 years ago likely compound my problems further. I think if I were to take the time to play through it again, take my time, and grind myself up, I would probably be able to just barely have enough skill to squeak out a win, but before I do that, I'd probably beat 9 first. Then maybe 10. Pixel perfect, unfair underwater jump in the middle of a wily stage be damned. So yeah, I'm done with this for now. While it might not be my type of game, this series is beloved for a reason, so if you can find a way to play it, go ahead. I also picked up Mario Party Superstars and played a few rounds with a friend. Like normal, it's a board game where you travel around and try to collect stars. In between each turn, you play a minigame to try and win coins. You can use items on the board, and there are also different spaces with different consequences, blues generally being good and reds bad. The main draw for this title is that it pulls from the original N64 games to bring back old boards and minigames. It also borrows a good bit from the UI of the first Mario Party, having a similar hub area and opening. So in case it's not obvious, this game leans heavily on nostalgia. I imagine it will be a big hit with those that played the early games. They also added in several quality of life improvements to the game, such as the ability to save a game and continue it later, turning off minigame instructions so you don't need to go over them each time, giving a fast forward option for some special board events, and automatically skipping past some CPU actions so that you don't have to sit and watch predetermined stuff, like, say, shopping that you have no control over. These things can make the game very fast-paced, and you can get through games a lot quicker if you need to budget your time. It kinda feels like this game has a lot more chance involved than other Mario Party titles. Maybe I just had horrible luck in the few games I played, maybe it's all the lucky spaces just arming players with more random items and coin amounts, maybe it's all those damn hidden blocks that pop up in record numbers, but it's just the initial impression I get. This makes it good for younger or less skilled players since, with good luck, they can win out over even the most serious players. This is something to consider as we move on to perhaps the obvious question: of the two Mario Party games on Switch, which is better, Superstars or Super? Or, given the very similar names, we'll say this one or the other one. The pros for this game, I've already mentioned, the nostalgia, it being easier to get into, and the quality of life stuff. With it having so much to pull from, It also has its pick of all the best from Mario Party games past, giving it a very solid base of content. The other game only had 4 stages, whereas this one has 5. Of course, this still isn't a lot, and given that they were just recycling and touching up old boards, you'd think this would have more than that in it. The other game, though, had more characters, and the ones we're given here look more plastic and some of the voices seem off. I think it also had more game modes, between the 2-player team thing to the simple, but existing at least, campaign, rhythm set of games, and the river rafting team mode. Here you have the regular party mode and some other game modes where you just play mini games that feel very bare bones. The new game does have more achievements, and there's stuff like encyclopedia entries, custom player cards, stickers, music, and a level up system, some of which were present in the last game, but here they feel so insignificant I care much less about unlocking them. Honestly, I don't think I'll play this game too much on my own. It'll probably be almost exclusively with other people when I do plug it in. A little disappointing, but there's still a lot of fun to be had here. I think more casual and older players will really enjoy it. For my money though, I'd rather just play the previous Super Mario Party. I do have some recording of my friend and I playing the game, so if you want to watch some in the moment's reaction, I'll be posting a highlight clip reel later in the week. And then there was Deadpool for PS3. In it you play as Deadpool. He strong-armed himself into getting his own game, and after bungling around in his apartment for a bit, he gets a bounty and the action begins. For too long, the stakes get higher, and some Mr. Sinister stuff happens, along with a lot of cameos from various X-people. To accomplish your goals, you get to hack, slash, and button mash, along with other moves like shooting and a short teleport dodge. As you kill enemies and build up combos, you get to buy abilities like strengthening your sword, improving Deadpool's healing ability, or even getting different melee weapons and guns. The gameplay's alright. It's pretty standard button mashing while dodging periodically. It also takes a bit before the healing factor takes effect, so there's a lot of finding a place to hide until your life fills back up. I wasn't super impressed with how it plays, and it felt more like I was going through the motions than anything, though the way I bought upgrades in this game, getting improved point drops first and then focusing on maximizing my initial swords, maybe more weapon variety would have spiced things up. Level design is also kinda weird. It feels like if I hadn't spent so much time playing video games, I would have been lost. I'm not sure if this points to bad design, since it seems like most players would get lost, or perfect level design, since some ways for it were so subtle and blended with the overall scenery so perfectly that it all felt kinda natural, but goodness, I imagine some would get frustrated. But all that aside, the main draw here is not so much the gameplay, but the story. The writing is very true to the source material, or at least some runs of the comic. Deadpool is constantly joined by 2 inner voices, one in a yellow text box, the other in a white. He remains sarcastic, bombastic, zany, and vulgar, and pretty horny too. The action is over the top, dumb, seemingly inane plans are carried out, and it's all very silly. This game strikes me as what No More Heroes was trying to do with Travis Touchdown. Both are anti-heroes, though Travis goes through his game trying to impress a girl and killing for killing's sake, whereas Deadpool, while doing very questionable things, does have a moral compass when it comes to actual weighty situations and will try to do the right thing. Travis is just kind of a self-centered douche, whereas Deadpool has gone through many traumatic events and is never really in a good mental state, so it's easier to sympathize with him. It's also easier to forgive the juvenile humor with Deadpool because of his cast of supporting characters judging him and his fourth wall breaking. It seems more like his immaturity is the joke rather than what he says. While this element is still present with Travis, it feels more like somebody thought that him jerking off his beam sword to power it and taking a dump to save was actually both clever and funny. I guess what I'm saying is, while Deadpool is funny knockoff Jetstrike, Travis Touchdown is a poor man's unironic Deadpool. Anyway, back to the game's writing, it's clear that whoever worked on this was an actual comics fan and knew a lot of the source material. From the comic montages that introduce characters, the on-point personalities of each, and even some of the deeper cut inclusions they have. And it seems like the reason for all this is that Daniel Way, someone who penned a very successful run of the comics, did the script for this game. It's very refreshing when different mediums actually utilize the source material to create their take rather than just assuming they can do it better. Doing so here gives the game its strongest element. Of course, that does bring up the question of whether this story would have been better as a comic or movie instead. Part of me thinks it would have. Another part of me thinks that the gameplay is passable enough that it justifies its existence. It's not so much a bad hack and slash as much as I say that there are just better ones out there to play. Honestly, the main problem I have with this game is the glitches. Right after the tutorial, you inflate a bouncy house and you can jump around on it before proceeding. Thinking that this was the way to move forward, I played around on it and got stuck, having to reset. The load times can also take an odd amount of time. Once the same checkpoint loading in at around a minute, then the next it being almost instantaneous. And then worst of all was the game-breaking glitch that occurred about a third of the way through, after the shoehorned in glory hole joke. I restarted the game, had it happen again in the same spot, ejected the disk and wiped it off, turned off the system that was giving off an insane amount of heat, which, side note, I might use in place of a space heater this winter, and then tried it again after letting it cool down for over an hour. And it still happened. So I did what any sane gamer would do. I went out, bought a copy of the PS4 version instead, played through the game on extreme difficulty since I'd already gotten pretty far in on veteran, and worked my way to the credits. No, I didn't. Of course I didn't do that. I just shelved the damn game and watched through a playthrough on YouTube, skinning through all but the cutscenes and boss fights to get the full story. It's a shame because the game doesn't seem to be all that long, there was still a lot of weapons to unlock and experiment with, and it seemed pretty doable, so I was looking forward to getting through it organically. I think if you're a Deadpool fan, the game is worth playing, just not on PS3. Hopefully the port ironed out most of the bugs. And that'll be that. I also finished 3 books this week, so I probably spent more time on that than anything, but hey, I still had plenty to talk about besides. These games were mostly disappointments, though. Only the first really gets a pass. For right now, though, thanks for watching, maybe subscribe if you enjoy this sort of thing, and perhaps I'll see you in the next episode.